Okay, so in general, these UVs look really good. All I've done is put the glass lambert a different color so I can clearly see what's on one material and what's on the other material. But yes, a few small things. So personally, I don't like this. A, because these end parts are getting stretched quite a lot. And B, because just the way this thing is laid out, it's going to fill up a lot of space on the UV that it doesn't really need to. So easy fix here. Because this is kind of in a corner anyway, I feel like you're not actually going to lose. You're not really going to lose any visual quality by making a cut there. So I would just use this kind of square as a starting point for some cuts. And we can decide whether we want to cut them all off or whether we just want to cut one side. So actually we don't need to go all the way in, we need to go in like this. And I'm just working on the UV because it's more, clear. If I hit, oops, didn't actually cut. So if I'm not in edge mode, that's why. Cut. So now we just have strips. I think that's going to be a better method. We'll have less stretching, somewhat less stretching, and this thing will take up less space. So I'm just going to go through and quickly do that. The other option we have is to come right up to the edge, but I think it's like as in to make the cut go along here. But honestly, I think it's better to have the seam hidden in there. We could even loosen this up by cutting these if we really wanted to. So if I grab this one and these two, this thing's going to unfold, one step more, and then there's no stretching. So it's up to you. It's that reverse origami principle, basically. So I am going to do it here. Just making sure I do the same thing on every single one. So this one's cut already because that was the way you had opened it up. And in general, I say, less cuts, more stretching. But in this case, I think because these are on the corner, they're very prominent. And if we have texture stretching there, it's going to just be very visible. The other reason, obviously, is that these parts are going to take up way less space on the UV if we do it like this. So I'm going to align them all to be straight. I accidentally pressed H. So that's that part done. I'm going to hide the high once again. I can see that you've done some layouts by hand, why this piece is so big. I mean, it makes sense to make the skull UVs bigger because you want, I guess, more resolution on the skull. It's kind of a focal point. But at the same time, you don't want this one to be too small. Also, another small thing is I just figured, why not have these face the same way in the UV as they do in the world? If I hit layout, yeah, I see it's much smaller. I think it definitely does make sense to grow it to some degree and to shrink this one to some degree, since the way you've done it makes sense. We'll figure that out in a sec. Let's check the stretching here. Okay. So these bits maybe need a little bit of work. I think the way you've done it here by splitting the end off, I kind of see why you've done that, but or splitting it down one side, I should say. When working with cylindrical pieces, it always makes sense to take off the end cap. The end caps are basically what are going to hold this shape together. So if I cut these, I'm going to pick one side to keep intact. So I'm going to sew it back on. Move the UV shell out here. And then I should just be able to cut all the way down with one cut. And it's going to unfold into one shell with much less stretching than your solution had. So basically for any cylinder, I would say imagine it like a plastic bottle. If you wanted to get the sides of a plastic bottle flat, you would have to cut the end, the top and the end off, and then you could unroll the sides. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. These dips and stuff inside, obviously they get stretched out. There is some stretching there, but I think that's still the best way to approach it. So we're going to look at the other parts as well. This one, I think this one can definitely use a new projection. What we effectively have is a donut attached to a cube at the end of the day, right? So why don't we treat it like that? Let's cut the donut off, and we'll do that by cutting along here. So now we can deal with this part separately. We're left with this cube. And we can probably just take both the sides, leaving this one. We're going to unfold this like a just checking I had it symmetrical. Oops, unfold. And then we just need, well, AR cuts don't go quite to the edge. That's a mistake. There we go. So now it's unfolded like as a cardboard box would get folded up. If we turn on stretching view, you can see there's basically no stretching. And we are left with our donut shell. Should be really, really easy. This edge is kind of tucked in, so I guess we'll use that one. And then we'll just go all the way around here. Missed an edge, my bad. Can I select that, please? Perfect. Now you have a strip, a box and a strip. Pretty much no stretching. Two shells, kind of optimal. That one's fine. That makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. I don't think this is doing anything for you. All those little cuts you had. So what I would do, I would just take both sides off. Create camera base. So we got these two loops. And we got these two strips. So these probably need to come in half. Both need to come in half, so let's do it like... Do you want to cut it in half or into three? Probably into three. I'm trying to think which angle the camera's going to be. It's probably going to be here, so we can get this one maybe, and then this one. It's not too bad. It might make sense to even have another cut, but we'll see. That one looks fine. Yep, perfect on that one. Although, yeah, it's good. This is very much the same as the one underneath it. We can open this up with a few cuts. So I think because these are under the mesh anyway, there's no reason not to cut these. Turn off stretching view so you can see a bit better. Already a bit better. Let's cut it so that it can actually unfold. So inside, one side inside. And under here as well. That's better. And then we'll just do the same thing. Cut it in half. So we have way less stretching as a result. I still feel like yeah, this one, I mean, it's inside the mesh, so we shouldn't feel bad about adding extra seams in here. Then they're going to be very hard to see through the glass. So got that one. And then we just got this one left. I'm going to cut it and chop this all up, to be honest, because right now we got this, but that still takes up a bit of space on the UV. So it's just, in this case, I think it's worth having more cuts just because you're going to get a much cleaner layout this way. And these seams aren't going to be visible because they're all inside the mesh. We'll sort out the layout in a sec. What is that? Interesting way of doing it here. I mean, it works, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So all this stuff I'm going to unfold, orient shells layout, and then I'm just going to look at whichever shells are causing me to lose space on the UV. So definitely these. And the same as we did on the other section, right? We can add cuts down here. They're not going to be super visible. Okay, now that is starting to look like a nice UV layout. Really tight, filling up the whole space, making the most of the however many pixels we have. I might even cut these. One here and one here. So as I said, it's always a trade-off between how many cuts you're going to make, because obviously the seams are expensive and the seams can have the potential to look bad. But in this case, I think it's better to have more seams so we can maximize the resolution of the textures you're going to have. So that's all the opaque stuff laid out. We're going to go back to the glass. In this case, I think your approach of laying it out by hand made sense. However, what I might do is, the skull is getting shrunk at the front, which is probably the spot where you want the most resolution on the skull, right? Because it's the part where, you know, the face, the personality of the face is. So what I might do is cut the face off, and I'll do that just by going from your existing cut here up inside this crack where it's going to be harder to see, and I will have a seam going over the top of the cranium, but I feel like it's worth it. As long as it's roughly symmetrical, it doesn't matter. I'm going to cut that, and then I'm going to go from under the jaw. In fact, why not? Let's go along this. I might triangulate the skull, actually, because I can see Engons in there already. Then there's some better routes to follow for this edge. And sew those back up. I've missed an edge somewhere. There. Aha. Nice. Okay. So that's going to reduce stretching on the skull. I'm still going to take off the underside of the mouth. So these are the turn off stretching. The face is down here because I feel like they're shrinking up the face in order to be able to unfold. So I'm going to make a new shell out of this. Create UV shell. Unfold. Unfold. There we go. So there's our skull with a lot less stretching. The rest of the head, and I was going to say you can reduce the poly count on that, but you're under, so why bother? So I think this is a case to arrange stuff by hand. We want this to be straight, obviously on the UV, and we want the skull to be straight, and we want the skull to be pretty large. This is the little stopper underneath. We don't really care about that. It's kind of hidden. But I will grab... What's that? That's the back of the skull. Oh, well, we might as well take our cut all the way to here. So we got 2 halves. So now we can have skull in the middle. One half here and one half here. Okay. So there is our result. Somewhat less stretching. There's still stretching in there, but it's probably not going to be noticeable. Maybe even... Yeah, you could just put a cut going into the eyes, like... I don't know. Something like that. Just to allow the eyes to kind of unfold a bit. Kind of reduces the stretch. I don't think it's worth it. Alternatively, you could cut... Cut the backs of the eyes and of the nose out as new shells, and then split these. Like so. Yeah, that works. Just hit layout to get them scaled uniformly. And then I'm gonna just arrange them by hand inside my UV layout. Oops. Accidentally left that sticking out. No huge variation in texture scale, so that looks good. We've got more detail on the face, which is presumably what you want. A bit less detail on the bottle. So overall, the UVs look like this for the glass and this for the opaque parts. So overall, the approach has been cut your opaque parts more so that they can lay out in a more grid-like way. And I guess to the same degree, cut your skull as well so you can get more resolution on the face without taking up too much of the space with the back of the head. But also cutting out these parts so that there's not so much stretching and distortion. There is a bit of stretching on the face. We could cut this more. Maybe even cut along there, but I think that's fine. I think that's going to do the job.